Hey, how you doing, guys? I got some exciting Linux news. Of course, this has to do with Microsoft Windows as well, or Microsoft in particular. And this has to do where Microsoft is going to be open sourcing exFAT file system. Of course, exFAT is file system is used for things like SD cards and USB disk drives. And in fact, I think the SD cards are going to be coming using exFAT as a standard now, and you're going to see that pretty much over the various manufacturers of SD cards. And they're actually going to add the exFAT into the Linux kernel as more than likely a device driver. And I'm also actually fairly familiar with kind of how that works because it actually even I'm trying to think, compile some of the Linux kernels before. It was a lot of fun, which is kind of weird because, I mean, of course, during the 80s and 90s, they were very highly competitive with Linux because they saw Linux as a threat. Of course, fast forward all the way to 2019 or even a little bit in the past, they realized that Linux hasn't caught on nearly as much as a lot of people would have hoped. I mean, Microsoft still has what about 80 to 90% of the consumer desktop, and they have about the same with business computers because it's simply the best supported. Linux is really hard to do it in the business environment because of numerous things such as support and there's just simply too many distros out there to support properly. But that's another topic altogether. I'm kind of getting off on that. So that's kind of how they toned it down from being highly competitive to actually working with Linux, and in many ways. And another reason why perhaps that they kind of veered off not worrying about Linux is because, of course, with any company, you really need to diversify in other fields. For instance, especially Microsoft services. Of course, their desktop applications. For instance, Microsoft Office actually makes them a lot more money than their desktop operating system. And of course, with their Azure cloud services that even Apple uses. And they're actually going to be open sourcing their development tools to other platforms. That way they can utilize Microsoft technologies. And of course, they're also dabbling with point of service or, for instance, cash register systems with Microsoft Dynamics. As you can see, they got a foothold in many things, which is really the way any company should do, is diversify in a lot of different fields. So they're even speculating with the release of a Linux kernel on Windows 10, which is going to actually be very interesting. And so somehow that's going to enable them to put I don't know if they're going to have a Microsoft version of Linux. I don't know, it would be Microsoft Linux. I don't know, Windows Linux. So it's going to be very interesting to see. I would actually also like to see other file systems open source from Microsoft, especially their Windows 10 file systems. Now, before, of course, I'm more used to NTFS, and I even had to look up the new version, which is REFS, I guess. So if you can be able to open source that, then you can like dual boot with Linux, and you have access to, you'd be able to read their file system, because right now I think you have to do workarounds using Fuse or some other paid solutions. So it'd be nice to see them open source across all their file systems. Be really nice. So I thought that was very interesting news, where they're venturing quite a bit more into Linux. I'm not saying they're going to go all out crazy, but they're definitely going into Linux where some of their open source where needed, because I think this is the right direction for them to go, instead of trying to compete with Linux, and then open source some of their technology, and then that way they can make money still through their services. And yet Linux it would serve the Linux users to be able to access flash drives and USB disks and things like that. So, well, thanks guys for watching, and see you guys later.